How's it going, guys? Welcome to FudgeMuppet and get ready for our latest Skyrim build. The Vanguard is the name of the build, and it's quite fitting for the character because before he found himself in Skyrim, he would always be at the front of the force that was his mercenary group. The Vanguard isn't the fastest build, and definitely doesn't need to be. He's very powerful in combat, has a nice magical aesthetic with contrasting color designs, and uses a variety of skills to defeat his foes. The gear for the Vanguard is an enchanted set of ebony armor but with no helmet, an enchanted silver moonstone circlet, Aureal shield from the Vanguard DLC, and an enchanted ring if you like. I think the gold sapphire ring or the silver amethyst rings are the best choices for this build. The Vanguard will be using the Ebony Flesh spell and frost spells like Ice Storm, Icy Spear, and Wall of Frost. Paralyze can also be used, as can any spells from the magic schools we've chosen. Those are just the main ones. Enchanting is obviously a skill the Vanguard uses to buff his gear, and we suggest putting magical resistance, fortify heavy armor, and fortify destruction on as many things as you can. If there's room for fortify alteration, you can do that too, but it's a lower priority. So your boots, gauntlets, chest piece, circlet, and ring can all be enchanted, but obviously your shield cannot. Aureal shield already has an effect on it, and this unique enchantment stores energy from any blocked attacks. The shield will release the energy when you bash and will start glowing very brightly when it's at its full potential. This will send enemies flying Fusro Dar style from a mere shield bash, which is very satisfying. Block is obviously a skill being used which will help the Vanguard bash, shield charge, and also have elemental resistances of 50% against fire, frost, and shock damage. This stacks nicely with your magical resistance from enchanting and also perks from the next skill, Alteration. Alteration will be used for all its spells, but especially the flesh spells. These spells will protect you and increase your armor rating. Paralyze will also be used to immobilize enemies, especially when the Vanguard becomes overwhelmed. One of the perks in the Alteration tree being used will also add magical resistance to stack on top of that granted by your enchanted gear, and this will stack even further with the use of the Lordstone, which gives 50 more points of armor rating and a 25% magical resistance bonus. You'll also have 30% magical absorption from the Alteration tree. As you can see, your magical resistance is ridiculously high and your elemental resistance is off the charts. Heavy armor will not be a skill used by the Vanguard, but this doesn't really matter as he uses his frost magic to slow enemies down to his speed anyway. Destruction is the final skill being used, so that's block, alteration, enchanting, and destruction. Destruction can be used for all its spells, but the Vanguard particularly likes frost spells. Things like Ice Storm and Wall of Frost are of course offensive because they're attacks, but they will function as defensive measures within the playstyle by slowing enemies down and draining their stamina. Many enemies who meet you in battle will feel completely drained and helpless, only to raise their swords and be smacked 30 feet backwards by your magical shield. You'll want to use charging often, but it's not overly necessary. Blocking to charge your shield and bashing is a priority, as is freezing the life out of all those who oppose you. The Vanguard will also use the Dragon Shout's Unrelenting Force to further blast enemies away, and Ice Form to freeze his enemies solid. As you can see, the playstyle of the build is very tanky and uses a good defense as his offense. The perks needed can all be found in the description next to the link to get one of our FudgeMuppet gaming mousepads if you happen to be interested. The stat spread for the Vanguard is 40% health to brush off hits, 40% magicka for all your destruction and alteration uses, and 20% stamina for sprinting, shield bashing, and charging. As you have likely noticed, the Vanguard is a Breton. This gives him a 25% resistance to magic. Magic basically doesn't affect this character now. Now that you know how this build works and have seen how it plays, it's time to hear its backstory. The Vanguard comes from Daggerfall in High Rock, and he grew up near a university that he learnt Alteration magic at. He learnt spells from other schools, but specialized in defensive magic. He was relatively poor and didn't have much money because he was always studying. He didn't rank high enough as an intellectual to earn a good amount of money, and this led to him to search for other means of income. After much training, he eventually joined up with a mercenary group who were recruiting in the area, and they were happy to take on a fighter with magical talent. They taught him how to use armor and a shield, but he refused to use the sword. He comes up with a unique fighting style using magic and the shield, and he was paid a good sum of the earnings of the group to fight at the front. The Vanguard would use ice to slow enemies down, making the fight much easier for the rest of the soldiers. The group got their contracts from the kings of High Rock mainly, and were used for realm stability. They would be sent in to take out some of the most dangerous bandits and even orc strongholds deemed dangerous. After many years, one of the kings wanted 6 members of the group to retrieve a family heirloom that existed within the ruins of Cloud Ruler Temple in Cyrodiil. They were to retrieve this artifact for the king as one of his ancestors was a member of the Blades. Upon arrival, the artifact was nowhere to be found, and so began a search that would lead to complications. Going into Bruma and settlements around the area, the group worked on an investigation. Eventually, they found out that a mysterious cloaked man had taken the item, and headed to Skyrim for reasons unknown. The group began to travel to Skyrim, eager to retrieve the heirloom and likely collect double pay, but they were caught at the border with the Stormcloaks and assumed to be there to help them. The group was split apart, with most dying and one fleeing. The Imperials heavily outnumbered the 6 mercenaries, and they did not kill the Vanguard but captured him by force to be executed. They would use him to set an example. After escaping Helgen and discovering he is Dragonborn, the Vanguard will follow this path. He learns of the College of Winterhold and will seek this out to resume his studies. He decides he doesn't exactly need heaps of riches anymore. He's the Dragonborn, basically a superhero, if magic wasn't enough already. The Vanguard will use magical companions like J'zargo, but do feel free to use plain mercenaries if that's what you want to do. Also, the Vanguard never returned to High Rock. He couldn't care less about the king, he only sort of liked the company of his group, and they were gone now anyway. That wraps up the Vanguard, and be sure to subscribe for more Skyrim builds, Fallout New Vegas top 10s, Fallout 4 and Elder Scrolls 6 discussion. Check the description for the perk link as always, our social media links and our mousepad link. Share this video with your mates who are noobs and need something cool to play Skyrim with. I'll see you soon, ready to nerd out with some more gaming. Goodbye.